Hello and welcome to Open Timelines. I'm your host, Sebastian Martin, and today we have Maree Batchelor with us. Maree is a medical doctor who had a profound experience in 2008. Maree, welcome to the show. So, Maree, you were a medical doctor. I've seen your credentials. You sent me kindly your diplomas, and so you are basically originally you started off as a family doctor, or were you practicing? You were an obstetrician as well.
No, I'm a medical doctor, so I've got a medical degree, and I went on and got a fellowship with the Australian College of General Practitioners, and that's known as a family doctor here in Australia.
Right.
I also did a diploma of obstetrics and gynecology, which meant that I could look after and deliver, if I wanted to, pregnant women. However, I chose just to do more the care of the pregnancy and the, gynecological aspects of looking after women. So yeah, that's what I used to do. So I was, practicing family doctor up until my very abrupt awakening.
Right. So I would like to dwell more about your past first before talking about your awakening in 2008, if you don't mind. So before 2008, you practice basically the general medical, or you were in the medical field for over 20 years.
That's right.
And during that time, at any given time, were you ever interested in consciousness, or you had ever had visions, or nothing?
No, I had absolutely no interest or understanding in any spirituality, any consciousness, or any religious affiliation or background. And I was very much a mainstream medical doctor living a very 3D or materialistic, existence. Although I was in service to others, and I was, about other people and helping them with my medical degree and my family of origin, just being, very much a mainstream 3D person with no understanding. However, I often felt this feeling that there must be something else. There was, I guess, a slight emptiness in me throughout my whole life, questioning, could this really be what it's all about? So I guess I never was really searching, but at times I would just feel this can't be all there is. And that would come up from time to time. And interesting, because I had everything. I was married to a surgeon. We had a mansion, swimming pool, tennis court, 4 beautiful children, being educated in the private schooling system, and, really lived a very, comfortable fairy tale existence, I guess, in terms of my reality at the time. So, but even in that setting, there was still this feeling that, wow, there has to be something else. This can't be all there is.
Right.
But that was the extent of it.
But surely, like when you were practicing, would you say that you must have had hobbies? Were your hobbies were about watching movies? Were you interested in like sci-fi movies, or were you aware of even like UFO stories, documentaries, these sort of things, or nothing whatsoever?
Look, my hobbies were really centered around, looking after the children and getting involved in their activities, their sport. I was, a jogger or runner myself, so I did, daily exercise. I would watch movies that were very mainstream, and I really had a limited interest in anything other than a very basic 3D existence. And really I say to people, had I met myself, who I am now, I would have actually thought that I was, that I wasn't quite right, that there was something, a little insane about me. And
Right.
so with that understanding, I actually do have some sort of compassion for how my family of origin and now my ex-husband perceive me, because it is such an extraordinary change in who I am and my understandings that they cannot grasp and they
Right.
cannot understand. And so the children have certainly got used to it and just accept who I am. But I
Right.
think they think I'm off in la la land. And even when I say there's a chapter about me in a book and I've been presenting at conferences or various talks and I'm doing regular Skype work for people, my family, it's almost like, oh, they're, you know,
Well,
whatever.
let's
keeps
not jump.
going.
Let's not jump too quickly to that topic
Sure.
first. So, remaining on that timeline, so you were practicing. You were in going to a clinic, I'm assuming,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
then in 2008, you basically had an event that completely radically changed your life. Can you
Yep.
tell us more about this, please?
So interesting, leading up to 2008, looking after my 4 children, I was a very over-cautious mother, very, very concerned for their safety. I wouldn't allow them to go in other people's cars if I hadn't been familiar with them. I mean, family members could occasionally drive them, but I was very strict about, who was looking after them and about their safety. And when I look back on that, I sort of wonder whether I had a knowing of something that was going to come. And so being an overcautious mother, I was the one who organised seat belts on the school buses for any school excursions. I'd make sure I was the one driving the children to parties. I'd often hover around at the parties to make sure they were safe. Leading up to the event in June 2008, my 4-year-old son, William, often said to me, "Mum, I love you more than you."
Hmm.
And he would say it often. And I found this, really curious, and I couldn't understand it. And I thought it really was just sort of the ramblings of a 4-year-old. But it's interesting because it was after the event that it started to make sense.
So when you were saying it to you at the time, was he saying it randomly, or was he actually saying it to you at specific times in your life? Do you actually remember?
Fairly random. He would just look at me and say, "Mum, I love you more than you." And then he'd, go off and play. He was a really amazing child in that he seemed to want to do a lot of things in his very short life. He wouldn't be satisfied with just skateboarding. You'd have to put his rollerblades on at the same time as skateboarding, virtually, piled on each other. And, he would just want to get into everything, riding his bike. And he was just a kid that really wanted to experience a lot of life. And interestingly, he did say to my father before the event, "I'm not going to school next year. I won't be going to school."
Wow.
So, there seemed to be a knowing in some respect, although I think if I'd asked him anything about it, if I'd clicked, I don't think his humanness would really have been able to explain
Mm-hmm.
what he knew. So that was my time with him before his tragedy in June of 2008.
So in June of 2008, you were going out with your family,
Mm-hmm.
with your other children, your husband. Everybody was.
Yep. Yeah, well, my husband was actually working at the time at the local hospital as the surgeon on call. He wasn't with us, but I was with my parents and my brothers and sister and all my nieces and nephews. So it was a big extended family day, and we decided to go for a walk down to the local beach. Very quiet beach. It was winter and there was no one else around. And we went down, had a play on the beach. I was with the 4 children, had a lovely time. And we were walking back up the stairs. It was down a cliff. And as we were walking up the stairs, William was ahead by, 5-10 meters at the time between his 2 uncles. And he went and stood on the top of the pathway in this quiet car park. And all of a sudden, I heard this full-on engine noise of acceleration and then a loud bang. And I ran up to the top of the stairs, and there he was, pinned to the fence by this car that had been completely out of control. It turns out it was driven by a 15-year-old who was not licensed and had no experience, and he was down in the quiet car park learning how to drive with his father in the seat. So, of course, when I saw William, immediately I knew that this was unlikely to result in him being able to survive. The underage driver couldn't even get the car off him. He didn't know how to reverse it. My brother pulled him out, jumped in the car and reversed the car, and William just fell to the ground unconscious. As I was going up the stairs and when I heard the bang, I actually said, "Which one of mine?" And my sister actually said to me, it was so interesting because there were so many people and children up there, and it may have even been the garbage bin that was hit, but I knew that it was one of mine. And when I recall being on the beach, even though there was no visuals of the road above because it was down a cliff, I actually now recall, well, I did recall very soon after, seeing the car driving down the road, even though there was no visual ability because of the cliff. So little interesting things that sort of showed me that there was some sort of knowing and remote viewing and something else going on. And as soon as I saw him, I was immediately downloaded with this feeling that there was something else going on.
Right.
It was immediate, this feeling of there's a bigger picture here. And I was, of course, absolutely traumatized, quite hysterical. The, television cameras arrived, the ambulance arrived, television before the ambulance, mind you. And it was really just a chaotic scene. I called my husband and said, "William's been hit. You must come here immediately." He actually thought, I just meant that he'd, been mildly injured. And he came racing to see him unconscious, lying on the ground there. The flying helicopter arrived, and Eric, being a surgeon, was able to accompany him to the Children's Hospital here in Melbourne. And it was when they arrived in the hospital and I was packing all my gear into the car to follow them up with my sister, my husband rang me and said, "Look, he's made it into theatre. That's a really good sign that if you can actually make it that far and survive, then your chances of living are much greater." And when he was speaking to me, a light hit me in the head, in the face, and it was just, an overwhelming feeling of something else was going on. And then I thought, oh no, this must just be like a stress migraine coming on or something. And so I dismissed it. But it turned out that when my husband had been calling me, William was on the table in the hospital, in the theatre, having open chest cardiac massage, and he'd actually died on the table at that time. They did revive him, but it was absolutely when my husband at the time was calling me to say he was in theatre, he was going to be, his chances of survival were higher, that I received this light. And, I now realise that had something to do with him actually dying and leaving his physical body. So he survived in the hospital unconscious for 11 more days, went through some horrific procedures, and it just became obvious that his injuries and it was just incompatible with him surviving. And he actually died 11 days later. That whole time, of course, I was, in profound grief, trauma, hysteria, chaos. But every so often there would be a feeling of, it's okay, there's something going on here, there's something, and even a sort of sense of there was a bigger plan here. And my 3D mind found that very, very difficult to comprehend. And in fact, that was very challenging for some time afterwards, with the things that were sort of coming to me and downloading to me, was actually somehow using, using my 3D or my, my left brain understanding with what I was being told and shown, because it just didn't make sense to how I saw the world in my previous existence. Yeah.
So when you were, you went to the hospital, and then you felt compelled to go back to the scene many days later.
Yeah. So after he died, I remember I just decided to go back to the site. I'd been given some messages prior to that, things like, you need to simplify your life. You need to look at things differently. There's something else going on. You need to try and understand more about this. So I went back to the site, and coming out of the site where he was actually pinned to the fence was a ball of light again coming out that completely immersed me. I felt so peaceful, so calm, and just this knowing that everything was okay.
Did it come to you, sorry to cut you off, but did this ball of light came to you facing yourself?
Yeah, it came from the site and came towards me and just immersed me. And I was just sitting there just going, oh, wow, it's all okay. And I was really immersed in this just peaceful feeling that everything was going, it was how it was meant to be. And I nearly called my sister to say, oh, it's all okay. Everybody needs to calm down. This is okay. And I really felt that things were fine. And I drove back to my home, which was about 10 minutes away. But by the time I got home, I just went, oh, that's ridiculous. How could anything possibly be okay? And so I kept flipping from this peaceful feeling and a greater understanding to just this terrible grief and trauma. So it was a difficult time of flipping from one to the other and trying to actually integrate what was going on. As I said, I was a jogger at the time, and so I would go out for runs and I would call out to God. Again, an interesting thing, because I wasn't religious, but of course I was pushed to trying to, understand. And I called out, God, you are going to have to help me. I can't survive this. And I really heard a voice, and it said, you need to be quiet. You need to be still. And it was just so powerful. And by the time I got home after that particular run, I just went, right, I need to shut the gates. I need to be at home quiet. I need to start meditating, and I need to know what's going on here.
So was this voice masculine, feminine? Can you describe it?
I would say it to me probably had a masculine tone to it, but it was just this, but it was just so clearly it wasn't me. It came from elsewhere, and it just was guiding me. And so I followed those instructions and started to meditate. And then I started to read around the topic of consciousness and waking up. I was just guided to that. Interesting, I'd just recently been to the local shopping centre to get some photos developed of William, and as I was walking past a bookshop, there was Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and I was just drawn to buy that, and that was my starting place. And I read that book cover to cover a number of times and found it absolutely comforting. I understood it all. I knew what was going on, and I just thought, okay, there's something here that other people do understand. Because again, understanding I had no spiritual or religious background. It was just, I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anywhere that could help me. And I was told by people, oh, you need to go and see the doctor. You're going to need help with this. But the doctors could only offer me, antidepressants and sleeping tablets. And I was aware that this was not the way I needed to go. And I knew I wasn't depressed. This was a grieving process that needed to be felt, needed to be investigated. And I certainly didn't want to be put to sleep or dampened down with antidepressants.
Now, you may answer, sorry again to cut you off, but you may answer the question or not. It's up to you, and I can probably change it if you want to. But the main question I have for you is, at that time, how was your relationship with your husband?
Look, it was fine. He was, we were both just sort of grieving in a way, grief is a very personal thing, and how you grieve is very different to everybody else. He could see that the path that I was taking, and he was supportive of me at the time. Again, though, he was, he wanted me to pursue sort of a more normal avenue or mainstream avenue, and asked me to go and see a psychologist. And I took the children and we went and had a couple of counselling sessions. But I found them absolutely useless. I was the one passing the box of tissues to the psychologist, who was just overwhelmed by the story. And I really didn't find them helpful. But of course, at that time, I was getting more downloads of bigger understandings. And so I could hold the grief in a different way. And that was, again, I think, a little confusing for everybody in the family, because they still, they couldn't understand any sense of what I was sort of grasping. And but look, he was very supportive at the time, and there
was no blame thrown at you or anything else.
No, and I think because I had all my family with me, and he had been standing on the footpath between two uncles. It was just clearly not any level of negligence. He didn't run on the road. He was on a footpath between adults and multiple children around him. This was seriously one of those freak accidents that again made me think this was somehow lined up. And the road that he was on was William's Road. So William was hit by this out of control car on Williams Road, with me getting these downloads, and I just kept thinking there's something more going on here. And I was then drawn to sort of look at the mystical side of religions and start to investigate that, and realize that they talk about light and being immersed in peace. And so I started to put the threads together with that. And then I was guided to go to the local ashram here where I live. And this ashram was based in the Hindu philosophy and was connected to this village in India. And I spent a lot of time there meditating and joining in with their workshops and listening to their regular Saturday, what they call a satsang. And I became very involved in that. Again, that was very misunderstood by most people. That was considered pretty out there, that I was attending that place. And my husband actually and my sister came with me regularly up to the ashram and found it very helpful. So there was some level of awakening happening with them as well. So I really just kept exploring, and I looked deeply into the mysticism of religion. And then I realized that there had to be a science behind this. And I looked further into it and started to realize that some of their teachings were describing things that from our past. And I realized there was a history to this that sounded very real. And it started to make sense from an archaeological point of view, pyramids and temples and beings that would be descending down on the earth from the sky, from machines in the sky that are written about in some of the Vedas and the ancient texts of the Hindu religion. So I was starting to piece it together. And, I then sort of looked at sort of astrology and astronomy and anthropology, and just started to put pieces of the puzzle together and realized that this was really something way bigger than most people can understand. And it was about consciousness, that it was about this field of energy that connects everything. And it started to make more sense to me what was going on.
So when you were grieving and you knew, like, you discovered that there was life after death, literally, you didn't believe in this before?
No.
Really?
Not at all.
But somehow you had a confirmation that when you were engulfed by this ball of energy, that all of a sudden you just had this awakening and awareness. Did you try to go and see some psychics and trying to communicate with your son at that time?
I did go to a psychic who gave me some information, but I must say I found more my own inner knowings and my own path the most helpful. It wasn't about me getting a lot of support from external people telling me things. Throughout that time, I would notice a presence when I was very quiet or when I was meditating, and I would talk to this presence, and I believe it was William, and I would get stroked on the cheek, or I would get, you know, touched on the shoulder, and I would have a feeling of him being around.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a cold sort of breeze, or a fluttering in my face. And again, it was accompanied by a sense of peace. And so I had a lot of knowings, but it really wasn't about me seeking through other sort of avenues, which was interesting. I didn't find them as helpful as just my own inner process and researching what came to me, as opposed to looking to others to offer.
And there are probably a lot of charlatans out there too, right? So you never
Well, yeah, and you know, it was again such a different area for me to be looking at, and I you know, just didn't know quite where to start with all of that. And certainly sitting in the ashram and meditating and putting the pieces together was what was the most helpful for me. And at that time, it probably took me a number of years of doing that before I decided to return to some form of work. And I went back to working then as what I would describe as a spiritual counselor, teacher of meditation. And I found that a very, very helpful modality. And I noticed that I was able to hold a space and an energy for people, even at that time, to help them go through a lot of their process. And I started to understand that illness, how it was connected to being away from the understanding of who we really are. The further we are away from feeling at peace and connected to something, you know, bigger than the human us, the more we were sort of in dis-ease or unease. And that would present itself with psychological disorders, depression, anxiety, but also physical illnesses. And it was starting to make sense to me that medicine didn't really have a hold on you know, this more holistic approach and understanding energy and our connections. So
you
for me.
Yeah, so you became a mother again in, was it 2009?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I got pregnant very quickly, which was, again, it was seriously like a miracle, I can tell you. It was almost like an immaculate conception, and she was due exactly on the date of his death, 1 year later.
Wow.
I actually, so I gave birth to her. I actually ended up having her a week early because I couldn't cope with all the grief and trauma of having her on the exact date. So she came a week early, and I named her Eleanor. And interestingly, I discovered later that the name Eleanor means the light. And she really was bringing light back into our family. It just gave us, you know, she just gave us some joy and has continued to do so, and is a beautiful, beautiful addition to our family. So again, you know, I have 4 children, and interesting, one of the things that I realized that I had been so identified with being this mother of 4 children, and they were very close in age. At the time of William's death, they were 2, 4, 6, and 8. And I would pride myself on the fact that I had these 4 children very close together, and I was a working mother, and, you know, the badge of honor that you get when you're achieving all of these things. But I did let all that go and realize that there was just, you know, I really needed to find out the truth of who I really am. And that became my pursuit.
So being a mother didn't discourage you to pursue your path of enlightenment. And so you decided to, at one point, go to India. So chronologically, can you tell us what date, when you decided to go, and what happened around that date?
So the ashram that I was attending, the guru, if you like, that was running that ashram had regular visits back to India, into a little town called Ganeshpuri, where he had actually done his sadhana or spiritual practice under another guru called Baba Muktananda. And his guru was actually Bhagwan Nityananda, who was buried in the temple in this town in Ganeshpuri. So the ashram regularly every year went back to Ganeshpuri, and I had been asked, why don't you come with us? And it was interesting. It never felt right. And at some point I said to him, I can't go back. Oh, I can't go with you. It will be dangerous for my family. Now, I have no understanding of why I didn't have an understanding of why those words came out of my mouth, but that's what I said. And I really refused to go for many years and just did my own work and my own practice. And then my 2 teenage children came on a Saturday when they were advertising the next tour to India, and it was to be in October of 2014. And my teenage children at the time said, we've got to go, Mum. We really must go. It looks amazing. We want to go. And I thought, okay, fine. And my husband agreed. He would stay at home with the 2 younger children, and I'd go with this group to India. And when I arrived in this town of Ganeshbury, I felt absolutely amazing. The frequency of the area is just something like I had never, ever experienced. I felt completely different in a beautiful space, really starting to touch what I would say is the multidimensionality of our reality, that I could really, really feel it. And I had an amazing time, felt incredible, felt the best I had in years. And in fact, the best I'd felt probably ever. And I had an experience in the temple there where I was literally zapped on the head. And I can remember being there and having this full-on feeling going through my body that was extremely powerful. And I remember thinking, whoa, something big has just gone on.
So when you described the zap, was it like an electric shock? Can you explain what that was?
More like just sort of a rush of energy, sort of from my head down, just going straight through my body, but in a shock sort of form, but just like an energetic download that really just made me go, whoa, like something big has really happened here.
Was it going through down your spine or your whole body?
My whole body. It was my whole body. And at that point, I didn't understand what I do now about who this Bhagwan Nityananda really is and his galactic presence. I was seeing him as a realized being that was buried in the temple, that was emanating energy from that spot. But it was sometime later that I was given the information and had it confirmed when I actually attended a lecture by Mary Rodwell at a conference probably about a year later, where I recognized that other people understood this galactic presence, because it was another level of understanding for me to actually put together that this realized being was in fact a galactic being, multidimensional, from some other galaxy star system that had come down onto Earth and was embodied at that time in this human physicality to bring in energies. And he did an amazing job in the 1900s up until about 1965, 6 when he died. And he would emanate energy and frequencies and was spontaneously healing people. And in fact, that village was set up around him. But I understood that he was actually part of what I call the Blue Ray founder race. And in fact, I now understand that these beings that had a presence on the planet in India particularly seem to be from this Blue Ray founder race. And they're written about in these Hindu scriptures that I was alluding to before. And, they're the gods that they were bowing down to and still do in India.
Yeah, they're always painted blue on scriptures. You can see them.
Absolutely. And so that's, Krishna and Ganesha and Shiva and that's how they're depicted. And I think that they were visiting at times and people were bowing down to them, seeing them as gods coming in their spaceships. And it's also interesting because I think then that their presence, there was a difficulty with them coming. There was some sort of quarantine, but they kept the threads open to them through the mantras that and the scriptures, which were like threads back to this galactic race. And the mantras, in a way, are like their star language. And what is also interesting is that they would then send down incarnation, this being to incarnate at various times. And I think the realized beings throughout India are that they come in with this, connection, very strong connection to their galactic selves, and offer this energy and wisdom to heal people.
I would like to, stay on that blue race for, after this question, which would be more about your time in India. So while you were meditating over there, you were with a group of people. I heard many times over that when people go to these kind of groups, you don't really have much sleep because you meditate for quite some time. You probably get like 3 to 4 hours of sleep if you are lucky. Was that your case, or did
no? Well, that wasn't the type of retreat we were on. It wasn't. There was some group meditations, but they would only go for an hour, and there was 1 or 2 a day, if that. Interestingly, when I was there, I kept moving away from the group. If anything, I was drawn to my own process. And I was visiting the various other temples and things in the town, and spending a lot of time just doing my own meditational connections, and really felt less inclined to spend time with the guy, the head of the ashram from here where I live, and I was just drawn and realized that the person who was really meant to be guiding me was this great being in the temple.
You see, like you, when I had my own awakening back in 2011, and I was not from this world either. Consciousness meant absolutely nothing to me. And when I resorted to the services of an hypnotherapist, I remember her guiding me through my past lives and trying to discover, who I was and so on. And for whatever reason, I always remembered that space of comfort, which was the base of every time we're doing some hypnosis session. I was seeing myself on top of a cliff in a very desertic area. Down below was a city with a dome city, so covered in glass. And I was a blue being.
Oh, wow.
I was actually sitting down on that mountain, looking at 2 moons on the left-hand side. It was very hard to breathe, in that space, but I could see and I could live through that experience as a first person. So I could see my hands, I could not see my face, but I could see my body. And for whatever reason, I never felt that connection. I never could grasp why I was seeing this, and I didn't really see any further until over the years, I had a dream one night when I was in direct communication with that same blue being who talked to me in my dream, saying, and I could see him, I could see his face. And he said to me, now I can see you and you can see me, and we know who we are. And we basically came from the same group of beings. So our soul was a split soul from a different type of galactic group that existed, and could control the soul or the energy from the source to learn from these experiences. So while we are kind of toys, for higher ET races, we understood that we belonged, or we had a split kind of soul. But those beings could have been potentially deities from what the Indians would revere as deities potentially.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I see it as that we are them and they are us, and we are multidimensional. And so there's a presence of a blue being that will often come in and around me and actually be seen by my patients. And I'll go into that at some point about the shape shifting that I can do. And people see me turn into a blue being. Right. And I realize that that is who I am in a different reality. The multidimensionality of me is that existing at the same time. That is me. And that is, I'm able to connect with that. And so I see it as a thread through the different frequencies and dimensions. but it's all me. And
Mhm.
that's what comes in and does the work with me.
Well,
And
I can tell you something. I'm sorry again to cut you off, but I will brighten your day right now, because I can tell you, and this will be recorded, by the way, that every time it happened about 3 to 4 times already, and I'm sure it will show up on camera, that
yeah,
your face changed. You can see it shifting multiple times every time you go back to talk about India, like your awakening over there, everything but yourself. So your face changed, but everything else around you stayed the same. So the background stayed, only your
yeah.
face completely shifted.
Well, there we go. What a confirmation. And I mean, that is exactly what we're talking about. So that is me. And that is the part of me that is deeply connected to the Blu-ray founder race and deeply connected to India. And
Mhm.
what I realized when I said that I arrived in India and into that village, I felt completely different, and there was a different frequency. Other people felt the energies, but I felt like, seriously, I was home. I
Mhm.
was in this place that was so familiar in terms of frequency. So, I think that there is something about this connection and this thread that is absolutely real, and you're seeing it. And that's powerful confirmation that you can see that. And many patients do see that when I'm doing the work.
Mhm.
Not everybody can, and this is where we fall into difficulty, because it's up to a certain person's receptivity and abilities for what they can actually receive from me, or even see coming in and around me. But
Right.
certainly that becomes very evident for a number of people. So if you like, I'll get into what actually happens with my work now, that since that transformation, or even
We will get there, but very quickly, I just would like to again go back to India and
yeah.
when you got this awareness
Mm,
from the blue beings. Could you, so just to clarify,
sure.
this has nothing to do with what people call the blue avians, right? It's just more like deities from India that you had a direct connection with. Now, would
Mm-hmm.
you say that those beings were from a specific planet, or any correlations with anything else?
Look, I think they are from a particular galaxy. A star system, absolutely. I don't have information from exactly where they are, and but I just know that they are a presence in another dimension, other frequency, other galaxy, and they have been making themselves known on the planet for eons. But there seems to be this presence coming through more and more now. So I think they had their presence in India, as I said, coming in their flying machines, and then they left sort of again further footprints through the realized beings that were present in India and still are, and now coming through people like me and probably you to do
Mhm.
our work. And so with that activation, I would call it, that happened in the temple, I got a very clear understanding that I was going to be working with these energies, that I had a mission that I needed to step into, and it was going to be about healing.
All right, so let describe that transition from your awakening in India and going back to Melbourne, Australia, and practicing what you do today. So tell us exactly how you've learned
Okay,
what you do.
so well, it was a very interesting journey. So I came home, and how I would describe it would be that I was in cosmic consciousness. I actually was living in that reality, finding it difficult to be very grounded in this reality. I was still able to care for my children and do the necessary things for them. However, I really was in the world and not of it, and not grounded and feeling quite blissful. And I didn't have any veiling of what was happening, in that I didn't hold back from telling people what I was experiencing. And that in some ways was a bit of a downfall, because I started to speak the truth. And I was saying, oh, there's these energies that have completely transformed me. I'm going to become this healer. I've got work to do connected to these great beings that are from another planet, and there's other extraterrestrials, and there's UFOs. And I started spouting all of that. And it was then that everybody decided that I had lost the plot.
Right.
And my husband was finding it absolutely intolerable. And my children were finding it quite uncomfortable and really just confused. And I think, the children probably would have coped with it because I was still very loving and caring.
Mm-hmm.
Had the adults in my life not been so judgmental and dismissive of it. And again, I go back to the fact that I have compassion and understanding, because the old me would have reacted the same way for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband at the time said that I was incapable of, being responsible, although I disagree. I was still managing, but I think he just found this sort of the language in my state of being was too difficult. So he actually made me leave the home. He threw me out.
Wow.
And I ended up being separated from the children. And he was supported very much by my family.
Can you tell me what was the date when this happened?
It must have been around early February, early Feb.
Of 2015?
Yeah, 2015.
Okay, so at that time, and I can really completely understand what you went through there. As you can imagine, my whole background, my family, friends, didn't quite understand. Even my wife did not understand what I went through. They could not understand it. They could not support it in a way. But I was, again, firm in what I believe, what I went through, and so I would not back away from it. I resigned from my role as chairman of the board for my multinational company I've started. I resigned from the local chamber of commerce, associations I was involved in as vice president, just to focus on this completely. My wife had major problems with it at the beginning, not quite understanding what I was going through, and losing almost friends over this. We had friends who were doctors, lawyers, all of that. So they started distancing themselves from me and from our couple because of what I went through. And so I fully understand. But at the same time, I also realized that my wife was a grounding force in what I was experiencing. And therefore, I kind of listened to both sides and try to find a way to grow from that. Now, it is very clear in your case that your husband decided to part ways. He was facing obviously more turmoil.
One of the things that was so obvious to me was that I seriously couldn't control what was happening to me. So even though you said that your wife had been a very grounding experience, I was so catapulted into this cosmic consciousness. And I think for a reason, because I think that if I had had much more any more groundedness, I wouldn't have pursued it, because it was really so painful to watch everybody around me. And it was like I was looking at them through a glass pane, that they were in a different reality to me. Mm-hmm. And they would call me in for a family meeting, and they'd all be so serious about what was happening and how I was behaving. And I'd be looking at them going, what's all their concern? It's all fine. I now know what's going on the planet. I've got work to do. And then I could see the pain and I could have sympathy with it, but I actually wasn't allowed to get down into it with them. I was just continually being told, it's all going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. Mm-hmm. I had, at one point, I had been so excited about the connections that I had made in India, and I was very connected with some Brahmin priests over there because of their mantras and the light language. And I even was so excited about my husband continuing on this journey with me, that I had suggested that we bring out 2 of these Indians to come and stay with us and to give him the experience, hoping that would activate him. And he, at that point, so I had mentioned that in December, and we actually did organise for 2 of these Indians to come and stay with us from the village, because I was hoping to bring that energy into the family to help activate others, to get everybody on the same track. But that was, of course, a disaster, because he could see how connected I was to them and to the mantras and to this way of connecting. So it was complicated because he couldn't understand. It was really, really confronting him and my family. What was Mum doing, inviting Indians from the village over to our home?
Right.
And what was this all about? Why did she feel so connected to them? And why did she, pursue this, even though everyone said stop? And they were saying, stop doing this, and I couldn't. I actually couldn't. And that's where there was so much judgment of people saying, just bring yourself back to being normal, and then we can all get on with it. And my husband and family of origin, my parents, very 3D background, no grasp of this at all. My sister decided that I was hiding behind spirituality for very bad behavior, and there was just judgment galore. So I was thrown out of the home. I was living in a hotel. I had restricted access to my children. I had restricted access to money. In fact, my access was really stopped. I was just given a little amount with a credit card. I was being judged by the whole community. We had a very big presence, the surgeon and the GP in the community. And all of a sudden it was the GP wife who'd gone mad or had a nervous breakdown. And they were all relating it back to William's death. Oh, she'd been seeking William, and this was really what tipped her over, and she's gone quite mad. So the medical community, my friends, my family, all really rejected me and judged me. My parents would say, oh, we tried to support you, but the support was very much about becoming, getting back to being normal and stopping this nonsense. And I was really incapable of it. I was incapable of stopping the process. It had started and there was nothing I could do about it. I needed to pursue this. I needed to find out what was going on. And I was being given messages and downloads and experiencing physical rewiring. It was an extremely emotional time. I remember just sitting in this hotel crying and crying for no real reason as things seemed to be leaving my body. I felt like I was doing what the ancient what some of the beings used to do in India, where they would just go off to the caves in the Himalayas and sit for years after years doing their spiritual practice. And I felt this little hotel room that I was abandoned to was actually my cave, and I was doing some form of spiritual practice. And I actually felt very calm about it, and I continually got messages that you are being looked after, you are being guided. And this process went on of this rewiring, and I spent a lot of time on my own and just really trying to work out what was going on. It was interesting. We don't have mentors for this in our societies. Nobody can understand this. There's no one to turn to for help. My family insisted that I have some psychological and psychiatric assessments. So I diligently went off and attended to some of the mainstream assessments. But because of my background, I was clever enough to actually answer the questions in a way that they didn't put me in hospital. But I really feel I escaped hospital by, the skin of my teeth, because, they really, those questions, are you getting messages? Are you seeing anything? Are you hearing anything? Are really leading you off down to a diagnosis of psychosis and being medicated.
Right.
So, and I certainly have lots of patients and clients that come to me now that has been their path, that they've opened their mouths about what's going on and they've found themselves medicated in a psychiatric ward. So I avoided that, but I had an extremely it was in some ways extremely supported and very peaceful, but at other times it was pretty distressing what I was going through on my own, unsupported, and physically, mentally, emotionally rewiring.
So when you came back from India and you had this awakening, thinking that you knew about UFOs, ET races, the Galactic Federation, all of these things. So could you tell us how you knew that UFOs existed and all of this? Is it because you read it, or is it because you were more inclined to learn about them?
I just started to get knowings. So I would just start knowing things, and I wouldn't know how I would know. I would just know. And then I would confirm what I knew by reading and researching, and then putting the pieces of the puzzle together and recognizing that the ancient, as I said, Vedic scriptures were talking about flying machines. And we recognize now that that has been going on in ancient civilizations, and it's not just in the Indian cultures. And so I started to put the pieces together and would get downloads of information and understanding, and then research it and go, oh, wow, somebody else understands this. And I can tell you the delight to know that other people across the world were actually starting to grasp this, or had done for some time, was such a relief for me, because there was certainly nobody in my local community that was going to understand any of this. And even it was now beyond the understanding of the local ashram that I'd attended. They, there was no help there really, because it had gone beyond their level of understanding. It was beyond this understanding of the new age community. We have some people that work in sort of what I would say the new age movement here, the love and lighters, and it was beyond them, because I also was getting downloads about why we couldn't access this higher dimensional energy and the truth of who we are, and what was going on to humanity to actually prevent them from feeling their natural state of well-being, self-healing, peace, love and joy. So I was getting the whole picture of, what had been going on, what's happening to humanity now. I started to, understand what was going on through the medical profession, the pharmaceuticals, what's happening with genetically modified food, what's going on with electromagnetic frequencies, how people have attachments with other non-benevolent entities, how our DNA had been tampered with by some of the non-benevolent off-world beings. And I started to get this picture of what was happening to humanity, and then what was happening on the planet for a shift in consciousness at this time. And it started to make sense. 2008, William's death, some awakening, 2014, massive activation, step into what I would say is my calling, my mission. And what a timing, because we know that the frequencies are changing to help humanity shift in consciousness, and more and more people are waking up. So I feel like this was all sort of timed, for me to be activated now, very grounded and, embodied of these light frequencies to do the work and offer this information and assistance to others that are going through it. And that's what I'm about. I'm here to help others.
Yes, exactly. So can you describe what is your mission?
So I would say that what it is really to help wake people up and support them in this process. So at any stage that they are on, so whether they actually have not, even if they don't have an understanding of this level that I'm talking about, the people that have been under mainstream medical care and not really getting anywhere, they'll come to me and I will be able to help them. And people will say, it's like you've switched on a light and pulled back the curtain, and I feel very different. So even if they're not even on a particular journey, but they're just clearly out of alignment with their energetic self, I can assist them with that. I also see that my job is to help those that are going through this awakening process that can be so disruptive, because removes all the programs of who we've been before. So where we've been controlled and suppressed into a matrix way of being to fit into society, to be nice little order followers, that starts to peel off, taking us back to our more natural state. But it's very, very painful. So I feel like I'm here to help guide people so that they can hold their light and actually manage what goes on in, with the rejection from people and from friends and family that don't understand them. With, so my path is very much about what it is I need to then help people with. And I think that's true for a lot of us. It's about what we've experienced that we then use as the assistance for others.
And can you describe the method that you use to heal people, either through Skype or in person? I'm assuming that everybody is different, but you still believe that you use the same kind of method, or does it change from person to person?
The level of information changes, as in what I'm guided to say to people definitely changes depending on the level of a person's awakening or receptivity. But it's all along the same line. And I'm pretty open with people, and most people will get a fairly clear understanding of how out there I am in terms of my understanding of consciousness and what's going on the planet. So what happens is I just become very quickly immersed in energies that I believe are my higher dimensional self. Mm-hmm. That energy comes in and around me very quickly, and I often feel it in and around me throughout my day anyway. It's becoming more of my natural state. And I know that I'm assisted with benevolent off-world beings. I know they're with me. I know there's a presence. And I know that the people I'm working with are being assisted not only by these frequencies that I'm bringing in personally, but by benevolent beings that step in and do work. And so I'm just guided to actually see what it is that's happening in a person's life. I'll be given downloads and understandings that are not of my mind. And I know that because, for example, I had a woman who came in with some back pain and she was having some difficulty with her partner. So I'm in my 3D mind going, oh, I'm onto this. The back pain's the emotional problem with her partner. And it was during the process of my work, I was given the information it was to do with her mother. And that hadn't been discussed at all. And I just said, well, what's happening with your mother? And out came, that the mother was wanting to move in with her. And that was, there was this guilt all around that, and that was locked in the back. And then the energy just came in, and I did a little few words of guidance, and it just pops out of the energy pops out of the back and restructures things, and the back pain disappears, and they feel emotionally more centered and more empowered about how they're going to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. So when I do the work, the frequencies will come in and around me. And as I said, it's very palpable for me and the patients or the person on Skype. And often they will see me shapeshift, more often in person than on Skype, where the frequencies will come in and somehow this multidimensional reality becomes more obvious for people. So it shifts their abilities to see. And I'm known to embody actual, not only alien beings, but also that great being that zapped me on the head in the temple. People look over and say, oh, you've become a black old Indian man and you're bald. And then they'll later on look at a photo of Bhagwan Nityananda and say, you were him, he was here. And so there's something about this Blu-ray race that we're all connected, and the essence of these beings come in and around me when I'm doing the work. I've also been known to be Ananda Maya Ma, another realized female being of around the same era. And people will say, you're an Indian woman, you've got dark, long black hair, you've got dark skin. And again, they'll recognize later that that was an Undermire mark. I've sometimes been a Chinese man with a long beard, a moustache, or I've taken on a Native American. I've even been known to embody and become an animal. People will see a wolf or a bear or an eagle, and this is really quite profound for them. And sometimes it'll just be flashes of different images coming through.
Now, would you say that potentially, some people viewing this may think, well, you've just been possessed, and that you became a host, and therefore you had no control over, whatever beings was going to be deciding to, take place and share whatever messages they want to share. What would you say about that?
I never feel like I'm possessed. It never takes on anything. I'm absolutely clearly me. Now, having been ungrounded and living in cosmic consciousness for some time after that initial zap, I know what it's like to not feel solid in myself. And in fact, I'm extremely grounded and I never feel possessed, but I feel there is something about the essence of those beings that I'm deeply connected to, and they are always benevolent, always of high frequency, and always result in the person feeling peaceful, a state of joy or confidence or well-being. They have heart chakra opening and energies pouring through their body of unconditional love and acceptance. They'll find that things are healed, so a foot drop will improve. I've had people that have come in with, back pain and stiffness, and that just changes. People who, are experiencing relationship difficulty will get some form of energetic counseling. So not only the words that I'm saying, but the energetic presences will actually shift their perspective and they'll improve their relationships. Interesting. I've had the experience where I've been working on somebody's, say, issue with their partner, and they've come back and say, well, that's really sorted out. Thank you so much for that understanding. And I feel like I'm a different person and I feel so much lighter about everything. And not only have things improved at home, but I'm now not scared of heights. So it seems to activate and clean off things that need to be released from a person in clumps. It's not just the one thing that I'm working on or the many things that I'm working on. It seems to bring off various things. So there's never been anything to suggest that it's anything other than high frequency, benevolent energies coming in and around me to do this work. And I can't explain it, but I never feel possessed.
Okay. That's all right. Now, in terms of your messages and what you're able to do today, what do you think is the reason as to why you've been led to lead this life?
I think that I've been led to do this because I have something to offer at an incredible important time on the planet. We need to shift our level of consciousness. We need to shift back to our more natural state of love, peace, forgiveness, and compassion. And if we don't return to that, humanity is really not facing a very bright future. I also see that having a medical background gives me some sort of understanding of what's going on in terms of, the human disease process. And I see that we have more obesity, more diabetes, more cancers, more youth depression and suicide, more depression in general. The use of antidepressants has gone up to a ridiculous level. I believe we're over-vaccinating people. And I think I'm here as a voice to address that, speak to that, and actually come up with other ways of assisting people to feel better.
Well, it's interesting because in 2 days, I will be interviewing a medical doctor who had his own awakening in a way, and is also an homeopathic doctor, and has decided to come forward with his methods on camera with me. And I feel that this is the reason why we are all joining forces to help the humanity to awaken, because we need to get to a higher level of consciousness, higher frequency, because as you said, we can't go on the way it is today, and things need to change dramatically. I have seen myself events about the future. The reason why this program is called Open Timelines is because we are always ever changing this reality, because this is the power we all have.
Mm-hmm.
We can change this idea of reality or illusion by putting all of our minds together and our consciousness together. And it's really with the collective consciousness that we can truly change this reality overnight.
Absolutely.
So in terms of insight, would you say that yourself, have you been given messages about the future, or is that an inner knowing what's going on today?
I get a very positive feeling and knowing about the future. I think that, we are waking up, and many more people are stepping forward with an ability to understand what I'm doing and actually receive my work, and actually also other people over the world that are being, activated into their higher dimensional understanding and truth. So I have a very positive understanding of what's happening. I feel that we are going through a very, very difficult, chaotic time at the moment. I think the darker forces, the darker agendas are really stepping up as we're receiving more light on the planet. We're getting more photonic light packages that are coming in and activating people's dormant DNA to make it, to return it back to its original state. And also the children that are coming on the planet that are already awake and activated and having the most incredible experiences. And also the Schumann's resonance that's changing on the planet, and the actual evolution of Mother Earth that's going on. So all of this, and the benevolent beings that are coming in more and more, having a presence here to actually help shift us out of chaos that we're in. I think it's interesting because a lot of my work is actually about cleaning off that's being done to a person, that's suppressing them so they can't find their inner light and their connectedness and their mission in life as well. And what I have found is some of the negative agendas and the things that have been done to people with karmic patterns and family lineage programming, or even some of the artificial intelligence and things like that is overlaid into people, or the toxins. My work actually cleans that off and actually allows people to feel their light and step forward into, the truth of who they are. Mm-hmm. And what I really want to get across to people is, no matter what is happening to us on this planet, we are the most powerful beings. As embodied beings of light, inner physicality on this planet, there is nothing that we cannot overcome.
That's right.
So that is the message, that, don't worry about the chemtrails and the toxins and so forth. Be aware of them. My work is to say to people, we need to be aware, because now we need to know what it is that we're rising above. So it's not about putting our head in the sand. It's actually saying these things are going on, but this is actually not going to be something that's affecting me. And you bring your frequency beyond and above the level that those things can affect you. And that's what my work is about. It is really about bringing in the light, helping people to embody more frequency and actually overcome what's happening to them.
Yes, exactly. And I completely, sympathize with this idea, because I've been talking about this on radio shows and so on myself. And I, had this insight. And I also believe that we can't live in fear. Fear is the enemy of all. If we live in fear, if we're afraid of who we are, who is out there to harm us or to help us, we won't be able to rise above this
absolutely
reality. So this is truly the main message here, is to awaken to who we truly are, is to get in touch with that higher self of ours, so we can really truly understand how we can help one another and network each other on this planet in this critical moment in humanity, where we will see this in our lifetime, by the way, and I can tell you this today.
Yeah.
It's something that will happen. And the reason why we are all doing what we do today is because we've been awakened on purpose. It's been told in history. After 2012, the Mayan calendar talked about it. It was not the end of the world. It was just an awakening of humanity to get to the golden age. And that's where we are today. And we will see some changes very, very quickly. And as you know yourself, time is accelerating, and we're certainly going to be experiencing more beautiful things down the line. And I'm so glad that you agreed to become one of the collaborators for Ensuho. I really thank you very much for that, because we need more people like yourself and myself and other collaborators to share this message, because we're all in it for the same idea, is to awaken the masses and to share this message with humanity. People who don't know much about this, subject will be able to educate themselves on this topic, familiarizing themselves with it, and truly understand it. It would be like switching the knob of a radio and getting to the right frequency. It's all about frequency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, well, it's such a pleasure to be able to come in and collaborate with you in your mission, and here we are connecting. Yes. And I think it's really interesting when people say, well, how do we know that this shift is happening? And I think the fact that you and I are having this conversation today, I'm doing the sort of work I'm doing, you're doing your work, we're connecting. This wouldn't have been possible, some years ago. This is about the frequency and the guidance and what's being set up in the higher dimensional realms to bring us together, that you can be over there and I can be here in Australia, and we're connecting, and synchronicities just led to us actually meeting. And that's how this is unfolding. And I think that that's another great message for people, is not to get too caught up in the 3D timelines and perceptions of how things are unfolding, because they are being, things are being orchestrated from the higher dimensions and being set up. And so sitting with a deeper trust and a knowing that we're heading in the right direction is a very helpful place to be. And that you don't have to push with a lot of angst and effort, that things will unfold and you'll be led to the places and to the people that are going to, assist you with your, with your mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to thank you very much, Maree, for this wonderful interview and time spent with you today. And I'm looking forward to more chats with you in the future, and going on different range of topics. We can have overflown over the certain topics, but I'm sure we can go deeper in certain aspects of hybrid children, golden age, and so on.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
So thank you so much for your time. And
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Great to speak with you.
Okay,
thank you.
bye.
Bye.